Welcome to Pub Sports Radio's Ian Cameron Football Frenzy for Thursday, October the 29th. We're in week 8 of the NFL season, if you can believe it, and we'll look to keep the good vibes going when it comes to NFL betting. It was another really good NFL week for me last week, highlighted by the Carolina Panthers plus the points, getting it done against the New Orleans Saints, losing the game straight up, but staying inside the number, losing by 3 in that game. That was my top NFL play last week, getting the job done. And in fact, Carolina is in action tonight to kick off week 8 on the Thursday night game against Atlanta, which we will be getting to in just a second. But good to be back on this Thursday. A reminder, you can watch Pub Sports Radio, Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy every Thursday right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. And it's every week breaking down every NFL game from a betting perspective. This is an NFL show pretty much. At the end of today's show, I'll give you a couple opinions on the Thursday and Friday college football slate. Saturday, of course, I do the college football betting preview show on Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, myself and Connor Mack right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. And I have an announcement to make at the end of this show about a Sunday NFL pregame or kickoff show that is coming to the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel starting this Sunday that I will be part of. So stay tuned for that. We got an announcement to make regarding a Sunday morning NFL show that I'll be part of. So looking forward to making that announcement later on. Let's get right to it. Let's talk about week 8. Let's start with the Thursday night matchup here tonight. And not the best Thursday night matchup you could envision, but nevertheless, it's a football game. It's obviously tonight just this game and 2 college games, so you know it'll be heavily watched. You know it'll be heavily bet. It's the Atlanta Falcons and the Carolina Panthers. Carolina opened 3-point favorites here at home in this game, bet down to 2.5. Now all the way down to -2. So we've seen some Atlanta support and some Atlanta money coming in here in this game. It ain't my money, I can tell you that. Carolina down to a -2 favorite, total 51 in this game. First and foremost, we have to talk about the weather. There was concerns that Hurricane Zeta might be potentially impacting this game weather-wise. Rain, wind might be a factor here in Charlotte for this game tonight. It looks like the brunt of the hurricane, the brunt of the storm surge is going to be moving out of Carolina before the opening kickoff. So that's going to be good news. It's not going to really impact this game, the weather at least, quite as much as it maybe could have. We have to talk about the spot for both of these teams, and it's questionable, I think. For Atlanta, they did what they do best on Sunday. They snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, and they did it again against the Detroit Lions. Todd Gurley, of course, stopping short of the goal line, allowing Detroit, or going, I should say, getting in for the touchdown and not stopping short of the goal line, giving Detroit a chance to come back down the field and take the lead with a touchdown. And I know Todd Gurley deserves criticism. It was a bad decision on his part to do that. He should have obviously stopped short of the goal line, 1 yard line. You take the knee, you run the clock down, you kick the game-winning field goal, and you leave Detroit absolutely no opportunity to get the ball back. Obviously, it was a terrible decision on his part, but we've got to give some of the blame to the Falcons' defense. I mean, time and score and situational defense. Get a stop. I mean, I know we're just ragging on poor Todd Gurley for that decision last week to score that touchdown. But at some point, you got to look at it and say, you know what? Maybe your defense has to stop Matt Stafford with, 80 from going 80 yards in a minute to win that football game last week. And sure enough, another, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching loss in a season that's been littered with them. These types of losses for Atlanta. Now they're 1-6. And look, the effort's been there for the Falcons under Raheem Morris. They've given it a good go the last couple of weeks. The defense has improved. In fact, the defense has improved quite a bit. Minnesota didn't really get anything going against them. They held Matt Stafford and the Lions in check, of course, until the game actually was on the line, and then they reverted back into that, Atlanta defense that has pretty much struggled for the better part of the last couple seasons. But overall, they played a little bit better on that side of the ball. But coincidentally enough, at the same time, the offense has kind of sputtered a little bit. We're not seeing the Falcons finish drives. They're settling for field goals. They're turning the ball over. They're just not doing a good job in terms of getting the ball in the end zone as consistently here the last couple of weeks. So we'll see what we get here from Atlanta tonight. I'd be worried, though, because of the fact that it's another crushing loss. They're 1-6. They're going nowhere now as far as I'm concerned, and I think they know it as well. For Carolina, there's concerns here too. I mean, 2 straight losses against the Bears and the Saints, and the defense has really suffered. I mean, yeah, they lose Gross Matos a few weeks ago on that defense, along with Kayvon Short. In fact, both of those injuries came in the first meeting between these two teams this season in Atlanta. And, the Carolina Panthers, a team that, in my opinion, is definitely struggled on the defensive side of the football a lot more with those guys out. We saw it last week against New Orleans. I mean, every time the Saints got to third down, the Carolina Panthers just were not able to get off the field. And that's definitely something that's a little bit of a concern against an Atlanta team that's got some offensive potency. Nevertheless, I like what I see from Carolina on the offensive side of the football. Teddy Bridgewater was excellent last week against the Saints. He gave the Panthers every opportunity to win that game. Seemed like the Saints would score. Teddy Bridgewater would march that team right back down the field and be able to put points on the board. DJ Moore, I should say, Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson. I think they've been a very good wide receiver trio for the Carolina Panthers. Mike Davis has filled in admirably for Christian McCaffrey, who throughout the week has been rumored to be making his return tonight. I'm not sure on that. It's probably going to be one of those game time decision type of scenarios here for McCaffrey, whether he's able to come back. Obviously, they'd love to have him back. We know he's one of the top running backs in the NFL. But last I checked, he's probably not going to play tonight. They're saying it's a long shot for him to be ready to suit up tonight against the Atlanta Falcons. They'll probably hold him out one more week, even though he was practicing with Carolina's first team earlier this week. But I think they're going to try to give him another week before they bring him back. Like I said, Mike Davis has been solid, though, in the ground game for the Carolina Panthers. And I think Carolina here in this game, after 2 straight losses, now you're at home, you're 3-4. Panthers still think they're in this playoff race here in the NFC, and it's hard to disagree with them. 3-4, there's still a lot of season left for them. If they want to try to keep themselves afloat here in this playoff race in the NFC, you got to try to win games like this against a team like the Atlanta Falcons. I really, really liked Carolina last week against New Orleans. I like them enough here to bet them, and I am on Carolina here, but it's not as strong for me an opinion as it was last week when I took them against New Orleans. I would rather have the Panthers in the underdog role. Now they're in a role where they've got to win the game. But nevertheless, they're facing a team that all they do is find ways to lose games, that being the Atlanta Falcons. That's all they've done this year. Look good for 3 quarters, have the lead for most of the game, and yet find a way to just piss it all away and lose, like they did against Dallas, like they did against Chicago, like they did last week against Detroit. So, you could say it's not easy to lay points with Carolina. Yeah, is it difficult? Is it easy to ask Atlanta to win a game against anybody right now with the fragile psyche that this team's got going with them right now? I still think Carolina's the better of these two teams. They're at home. Atlanta's got to travel on a short week after another just gut-wrenching kick in the shins type of loss last week against the Lions. So I like Carolina here. I'm not worried about the downward move here in this number toward Atlanta. I think if you're interested in props, and I like mentioning a couple player props for these Thursday night games when I talk about them here on the Football Frenzy show, because it's a standalone game. There's only one game going on. It frees up, at least for me, it frees up a little more of the bankroll to look at player props. Todd Gurley player props make sense. Carolina's run defense has really suffered the last couple weeks. Todd Gurley props over rushing yards definitely makes some sense to me in this game. I don't think you can go wrong with a couple of these Carolina receivers, either DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson in particular. They've been lighting it up every week, and Atlanta's secondary is piss poor. It's been bad all season. The pass defense has been shredded at times. So those are 3 guys in terms of over their prop totals. Gurley rushing yards. Maybe you look at Moore and Robbie Anderson over receiving yards, over receptions. I think those are good prop looks for the Thursday night game tonight. All right, let's go to Sunday. Starting with the Indianapolis Colts and the Detroit Lions. We'll go, as always, in rotation order. Colts a slight road favorite here in this game, around 2.5 total right now in this game, as I just lost my place here. We'll bring it up in just a second. Colts and Lions. I think it was close to 50. Yeah, it is still 50, the total in this game. So Colts 2.5 point favorites in Detroit, total 50 in this game. Colts off a bye week, so that's the positive. However, Phillip Rivers, there's a peculiar stat for him. He's only 5-10 ATS in his career off a bye. For a lot of players and a lot of quarterbacks, it's a good thing to be playing off a bye week. For some reason, Phillip Rivers has had a really tough time of it in his career with the extra time to prepare, which is kind of bizarre. You would think that's going to be beneficial. You get more practice time with your receivers and a chance to get on the same page. And yet we haven't seen that essentially here yet from the Colts or from Phillip Rivers in his career being able to play well off a bye week. It's going to be interesting to see how the Colts play here. We're talking about a Colts team that barely beat Cincinnati. In fact, what did they do? They spot the Bengals a 21-0 lead before the bye week against Joe Burrow and the Bengals, and they had to rally from behind to win that game against a Cincinnati defense that, let's be honest, Cincinnati's defense has made a lot of offenses and a lot of quarterbacks look good this season, and they definitely made Phillip Rivers look good in that Colts come from behind victory against the Bengals. Before that, the Colts lost to the Cleveland Browns. Phillip Rivers had a terrible game there, a better game against the Bengals. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about Phillip Rivers this season at the quarterback spot for the Colts, is that you get him against a subpar team, you get him against a subpar defense, he's going to be able to do damage. He's going to be able to play well. You get him against a better team and a little bit of a better defense, you're going to see him really struggle. He didn't play well against Cleveland, a better team. He didn't play well against Chicago, a few weeks ago, better team. But against Cincinnati, he looked good. Against Jacksonville, he looked good. Against some weak defenses, he's looked very good this season. Minnesota, he looked really, really good. And we can't talk about Minnesota's defense anymore like it's an elite unit. It's not. It is one of the bottom tier defenses this season in the NFL. So that's what I'm noticing with Rivers this year for the Colts. You get him against the weaker teams, weaker defenses. Yeah, he can light them up. He can play pretty well. You get him against better teams, better defenses. That's where he's been struggling. Where does the Detroit Lions fit in? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. I don't consider them a good defense overall, although they have played better the last couple weeks. Jacksonville, Atlanta, though, bad teams. And to me, the Detroit Lions still lack getting consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They lack a consistent pass rush. And Indianapolis's offensive line, I still think, is an elite group. They're one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. Sometimes that doesn't stop Phil Rivers from making a mistake or two, but he should play well, in this game. The Lions defense is not exactly very good, again, at pressuring quarterbacks, and that should give Rivers the opportunity to be able to make plays throwing the football down the field. T.Y. Hilton's had an off year so far for the Colts. That's kind of surprising. He hasn't necessarily found that cohesion and rhythm and chemistry with Rivers yet, but you got to believe that the bye week's going to help that and maybe get T.Y. Hilton going. He's had some drop passes. He's just not looked like the same number one go-to receiver this season at times for this Indianapolis offense. You got to think the bye week, a chance to get everybody on the same page, get everybody on track is going to help that. Thank goodness Zach Pascal has stepped up. They've got a pretty good tight end with Jack Doyle, and they've been able to step up, but they need more out of T.Y. Hilton. It'll be interesting to see if they can get that here in this game. On the flip side, you look at the Lions in terms of their offense, and, Matt Stafford played pretty good against Jacksonville. They didn't play as well last week. They moved the ball a lot, Detroit, last week, but they kept getting bogged down in Atlanta territory, and that kept them from scoring more points than they could have. And the Colts defense hasn't been as good at all without Darius Leonard these last couple weeks. In fact, you look at Cleveland and Cincinnati, those two games, very ugly for the Colts defense. A pretty good Colts defense before those two games. Then they lose Darius Leonard, star linebacker. And now all of a sudden, these last 2 weeks against the two Ohio teams, they're not looking very good on defense. And I think you can trace it back to that injury for the Indianapolis Colts. So, he's had the bye week now to heal up and be ready to go. So I think there's a good chance you're going to see him back. And that's going to be a huge boost here for the Indianapolis Colts. At less than 3, I like Indy here. I don't love Indy, but I like them enough that I'm going to probably bet them here -2.5 against Detroit. Here's the one issue for the Colts. They're off the bye. They should be focused. Frank Reich, you talk about coaches you want off the bye. You want those coaches that know what they're doing, have their team well prepared, pretty good from an X's and O's standpoint, pretty good from a scheming perspective. That, to me, is Frank Reich. And he's one of those guys that off a bye week, I'm interested in backing his team. That's the way I feel here against Detroit. I know Detroit beat Jacksonville, and they escaped with that fourth quarter or that last-minute touchdown drive to beat Atlanta last week. But, they're facing a better Colts team here. Like I say, the Colts, to me, I don't trust them against better teams. I don't trust Phillip Rivers against better teams and better defenses. But against the Lions, off a bye week, I think a chance to really get some, cohesion back, get T.Y. Hilton back on track. I think the Colts can pull this game off here. -2.5 is the way I would go. The one reason I'm going to keep this a smaller bet, though, is you start looking at the Colts' schedule coming up. I'm not going to say they ignored this Detroit team or look past Detroit, but they've got some big games and big-time opponents coming up. They've got Baltimore, Tennessee, Green Bay, and Tennessee again. Two with the Titans, of course, are leading this division right now, the AFC South. So, there's a lot of big games on deck for Indianapolis. That being said, I think they're better than Detroit. They're certainly better defensively than Detroit, in my opinion. Off the bye week, less than a field goal. I wouldn't want to lay more than a 3 in this game with Indy, but with it still being 2.5 at Bet Online, Bookmaker, and a couple other spots, I'm going to lean toward the Indianapolis Colts here. I haven't bet the Colts very much this year, but Frank Reich off a bye. Again, Phillip Rivers, when he's not under pressure, that's when he can have success. Lions have lacked a pass rush this season. I think that matters here in this game, so I think Indy can get the win and the cover, laying less than a field goal here on the road. Minnesota, Green Bay. We've got Green Bay 6.5, 7-point favorites here at home, 51 the total in this game. Interesting matchup here between these two teams. We know Green Bay played at Minnesota in week 1 of the season, and it was as ass ugly a game as you could ask for from the Minnesota Vikings. It was not very good for them. They got shredded, got absolutely gashed. The Vikings 1-5 straight up on the season. They are coming off a bye week, Minnesota, following that 40-23 loss against Atlanta. What to make of that loss? Because, it was a terrible loss, to play that badly against Atlanta. Now, that was the first game for Atlanta after Dan Quinn got fired. You got that predictable step-up effort. Everybody's focus goes up. Everybody's intensity goes up for 1 week after you have your coach fired. That's what happened for Atlanta, and Minnesota was the victim of that. But Minnesota, too, was also coming off that just gut-wrenching loss to Seattle the week before on Sunday Night Football, and you worry if there was a reverberating impact. Now they've had the chance to recharge their batteries, hit the reset button following the bye week. Do they play better here? Like, all you need maybe is a little bit of effort here from Minnesota, and maybe they can hang inside this number, because not everything is great in Green Bay land, even though, Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams absolutely teamed up to light up that Houston Texans defense last week. It was impressive to see what we got from Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, he was ticked off. The team was ticked off the way they played in their first loss of the season against Tampa Bay the week before that, and they certainly took it out on just an absolutely pathetic Houston Texans defense last week. The Vikings secondary, I don't think, can stop Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams and Alan Lazard and anybody else that Rodgers throws to in this game. It's a young cornerback group. They're not stopping Davante Adams with this group in the secondary right now for the Minnesota Vikings. That's a concern. Where's the pass rush going to come from? This is another team. Their pass rush and their ability to get pressure on the quarterback has been sorely lacking. That has been a consistent, characteristic of Mike Zimmer's teams here in Minnesota, is that they get pressure. And of course, Danielle Hunter getting injured before the season was a huge blow. And what does that say to your locker room when you decide to jettison Yannick Ngakoue, who is, one of your top relied upon pass rushers on that defensive line? They've traded him to the Baltimore Ravens. Almost like you're waving the white flag when you're making moves like that. And that's why I'm hesitant to back Minnesota here. It's a really, really tough game, because Green Bay, to me, laying less than a touchdown is not a side I'm anxious to bet against. Rodgers in this price range against a secondary you should be able to absolutely torch. But here are some negatives here for the Packers going into this game. There are a few negatives. First of all, they haven't solved their run defense. Teams can still run against them, and Dalvin Cook is back from injury for the Minnesota Vikings in this game. They might be able to hand it off to Dalvin Cook, and he can have a field day. And any good running back against this Green Bay team, I'm interested in from a props perspective. I don't even need to wait around to Sunday to tell you that Dalvin Cook props over rushing yards, maybe even over receiving yards, because they like throwing the ball to him out of the backfield as well. Kirk Cousins will do that a lot. Definitely you can look at some Dalvin Cook props in this game, and I think you can expect positive results with those. Kirk Cousins, really, to be honest with you, if you look at some of these Minnesota games, the Tennessee game, the Atlanta game, if he's not so horrendous with the interceptions and the turnovers and the bad decisions, to me, Minnesota's got a chance maybe to win a couple of these games that they've lost. But he has just been so awful early in these games with turnovers, and it happened again against Atlanta, a couple of weeks ago. Even the Seattle game that they lost. Minnesota's in complete control in the first half, leading at halftime, and Seattle gets life in that game thanks to two brutal interceptions by Kirk Cousins early in the third quarter that Seattle turns into points, and a Seattle team that had really not much going for them suddenly get going. So that's the problem. I think Cook being back is going to help the offense. I think the Minnesota defense, even with trading Ngakoue and having issues rushing the quarterback, Green Bay does have some concerns on the offensive line in terms of injuries for them, namely David Bakhtiari. And there's another key offensive lineman as well for them that may not play in this game. So two starting offensive linemen may not be good to go here for Green Bay. That's definitely something that that I worry about in terms of their ability to protect Rodgers. Bakhtiari is a great offensive lineman. The question is, can this pass rush do anything, Minnesota? A pass rush now where you've traded away Ngakoue as well, and you haven't had Danielle Hunter, and you haven't had anybody else consistently step up to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks for this team. So there's a lot of factors that point me to Green Bay, but there's some factors that point me to Minnesota as well. And so for that reason, I'm not going to get involved in this game from a side perspective. These one-win teams, and we talked about Atlanta a minute ago, Minnesota here. When you have one win, it's difficult for me to trust you to bring that requisite focus and intensity, because with one win at this stage of the season, you pretty much feel like you're out of it. And that's the worry for Minnesota, is that they mentally checked out, and then you're seeing your front office obviously trade away a guy that is supposed to be an integral part of your defense. That's a worry for me. That's a worry. That's a worry that's a message that resonates to every player on the team that, we're not going anywhere. This season's pretty much done for us. And if Minnesota is going to take that mindset going into this game that, we're 1-5, we just traded away. We're trading away guys now. We're thinking of next season and beyond. If they're going to have that thought in their head going into Lambeau Field on Sunday, they're going to get routed in this game. And that's the thing that concerns me in the back of my mind. So for me, it's just a game that I've got a lot of unsettling thoughts with in terms of both of these sides. I don't know if I trust Green Bay in this spot necessarily, with Minnesota losing so badly to Green Bay, but I don't know if I trust Minnesota to still keep their minds focused and on the task at hand, knowing this is pretty much a doomed season for them. So it's an interesting game, but not one I'm going to get involved with from a betting perspective. Next up, we've got the New England Patriots. What is wrong with Hoodie and his New England Patriots as they take on the Buffalo Bills? Buffalo 3.5-point favorites, 41 the total in this game. Where do you begin with New England? Their offense is obviously what we've got to start with talking about, because that's where the issue is. And the Denver game was embarrassing for the New England Patriots on offense. And I think it was even more embarrassing against the San Francisco 49ers last week, what we saw out of this New England Patriots offense. And the thing about New England's offensive struggles right now is that you can't just pinpoint it, or you just can't look at one particular player or one particular unit. It's very easy to blame Cam Newton and say Cam Newton's not playing well. He's inaccurate with the ball. He's making bad decisions. He's turning the ball over. All of that is true. But there's more than just Cam Newton that's the problem right now with the New England Patriots offense. I think some of the play calling has been poor for Josh McDaniels in this Patriots offense. Like I say, Cam Newton hasn't played well. The offensive line has been besieged by injuries this season. They only finally got a little bit healthier last week, and yet it didn't seem to make much of a difference. Struggling to open up holes for the ground game. Pass protection at times as well was a little bit of an issue against San Francisco. And then the thing that a lot of people forget to mention, the offensive line has definitely been a factor in the struggles of the offense. Cam Newton hasn't played well. We got to start talking about this receiving core. And top to bottom, how this New England wide receiving core, in my opinion, they don't have speed on it. They don't have guys that can separate from one-on-one coverage down the field. Who can separate from their man? Who can separate from an opposing cornerback on this receiving core right now? They don't have that blazing, speed on the perimeter. That's an issue. It's very easy to, to be able to defend them because a lot of their throws are short to intermediate stuff because they don't have that blazing down the field vertical speed to challenge a defense and stretch it. And you look at it in terms of going into this week, N'Keal Harry, who to me hasn't really been that impact receiver the Patriots were hoping anyway, but now he's questionable due to injury. Julian Edelman's not playing now in this game. In fact, this was big news that just rolled in about an hour or so ago. He didn't show up in practice today for the Patriots, and now it's announced that he's probably going to miss time and won't play in this game due to an injury. And Julian Edelman's another guy. He's looked like a shell of what he's looked like in years past. So, but still, I mean, you take him off the field, and that means defensive attention. It's going to go more toward, who's your top receivers now? Damiere Byrd? I mean, if Harry doesn't play and he's questionable, looks like Edelman's not going. Your top receivers are Damiere Byrd, Gunnar Olszewski, and Jacoby Myers. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at for the New England Patriots as your top three receivers going into this game on Sunday, potentially. If Harry doesn't go, and now it looks like Edelman's out against the Bills. So you've got a receiving core that was already underwhelming, to say the least. And now you could have two guys out, and they don't have speed. They can't separate from coverage. I don't see that big, deep threat on this Patriots team at all. Like, no deep threat whatsoever. I guess Byrd is probably the closest they've got to one, but he's not necessarily got the height that you want from a deep threat down the field. The running game has been spotty. This New England offense, I don't want to say it's broken, but it's damn close. It's damn close to broken. And I know Cam Newton was vocal on Boston radio during his weekly appearance this week saying, I better start playing better or I'm going to lose my job. Yeah, that's true. But Jarrett Stidham, I don't think can work any better with this, what he's got around him right now. You put Jarrett Stidham at quarterback, can you definitively say and be confident in saying he's going to be able to be what the cure that ails this New England offense? I don't think so. Because Cam Newton hasn't been good. We're not letting him off the hook, and I'm not letting him off the hook. But I think if you put Stidham under center, you're going to have a lot of the same issues that you currently have with Cam Newton at quarterback. An O-line that isn't protecting consistently. Skill position talent that looks awful compared to what other teams have at wide receiver and those skill positions. And I don't know if and the tools are not around either of these quarterbacks right now for this to be a fluid, successful, good offensive football team. So I don't think it's just the quarterback. I think if you were to put Stidham in there, the offense would still struggle, in my opinion, for the New England Patriots. So there's issues with this offense. Now, the Buffalo Bills, they've got their issues too, because to me, after what I saw last week against San Francisco, that was supposed to be a New England spot after losing as, touchdown favorites against Denver. That was supposed to be their spot to bounce back at home. We know Belichick off a loss in his career has been fantastic, but the fact that you not only lost that game against San Francisco, but you got destroyed, you got embarrassed, and you almost quit. I think they quit a little bit. The defense sort of gave up because the offense wasn't doing anything, and you saw San Francisco just rack up the points in the second half and turn that game into a rout. That's a worry for me. And that was supposed to be the New England spot to show something in a strong bounce back effort. And the fact we got that from the Patriots last week, 33-6. That means I'm not back in New England anytime soon. Certainly not this week, but I can't say I'm in love with laying 3.5 or 4 with Buffalo. I mean, you look at their last 3 games. Tennessee, they didn't play well. Kansas City, they didn't play well. The New York Jets, look, 6 field goals in the game for the Buffalo Bills, not a single offensive touchdown against the lowly New York Jets. That's a concern. The defense hasn't been the same this year. They've given up 32, 42, and 26 points in 3 of their last 5 games. They shut down the Jets. And it was a really good second half defensive performance by the Bills defense last week. I will give them that. The Jets didn't do anything. The Jets had 4 yards of offense in the second half. 4 yards. That's it. So the Bills did get their defense at least somewhat back on track here last week against the Jets. But again, we're talking about the New York Jets, the worst team in the NFL, team that's, only covered their first point spread of the season last week, and they barely did it. So, now the Bills defense, can we do it? Can they play well again like they did in the second half last week against the Jets? That's going to be the big question. But the New England offense, I don't think it's insane to say this right now. They haven't looked all that much better than even the Jets have the last couple weeks on offense. That's saying something. So, look, Buffalo's talking the talk all week long. They know New England has owned them. Let's be honest. The New England Patriots have owned the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo has had a hard time beating this team. This is supposed to be the spot where Buffalo finally beats this team. They are the better of these 2 teams. This is a game Buffalo is supposed to win. At home, they're the better team. Problem is the Buffalo franchise doesn't always win games like this. In fact, doesn't often win games like this. I'm worried. This is a big pressure game for Buffalo. It's pressure on Josh Allen. It's pressure on this defense. This is supposed to be a game where you're the much better offense. Your defense should be, and despite struggles this year, despite not being that same dominant Bills defense this year, this is supposed to be an offense that you're supposed to shut down. With the way New England has looked on offense the last couple weeks, the Bills are supposed to shut down this team. But there's a boatload of pressure on the Bills here. Yeah, they're 5-2. They're leading the division. They're still in a good spot. But they know this is their opportunity to beat New England. And sometimes when you want it so badly and you feel the pressure to win this type of game so badly, you don't perform your best. And that's still the issue I've kind of got here with Buffalo, and I'm just hesitant on actually backing them. I'll say right now, Buffalo or pass. I don't want New England in this game. No way. It would only be Buffalo laying the points for me, but I don't love it at 3.5 or 4. Maybe if we see 3 or lower, I get interested. But now with the Edelman news coming out, I doubt this number goes back down to 3. It's probably going to be 3.5, 4. It might even go up a little bit toward Buffalo with that news. I think Bills can win. I think Bills can cover. But when a team has just owned you and it's like this, this mental head game that, New England's just beaten us over and over and over and over again, that sometimes is a detriment, and you've got to actually show it to me first. You can finally beat the Patriots. It's supposed to be a game the Bills win, but like I said, the Bills team, when they're expected to win, those are often the times this Bills franchise, going back years, if not decades, has not been able to win these kind of games. But I would lean only to them here, laying the 3.5 or 4 in this game. And if they win this game, they go to 6-2, and they pretty much put New England to bed in this division, because New England would fall to 2-5. And at that point, I think New England might just think, you know what, let's look toward next year. Hell, let's even maybe tank for Trevor. Who knows? I don't think Belichick would do that, but New England, they're not good right now, but I get that sense too. They're going to bring anything they have in the tank here in terms of their best effort. Maybe you see it here, because I think they know that this is the game they need, and if they're going to salvage anything of this season. And so it's a really, really interesting game here, New England Buffalo. Whereas if the Bills win, they put everybody away pretty much in this division. But if they lose and they go to 5-3, New England goes to 3-4, they're right back in it. Miami is all of a sudden still in the mix as well for the division if the Bills lose this game. So there's a lot of pressure and high stakes here for the Bills. Let's see how they're able to handle that here in this game against the New England Patriots. Gas station sushi, like in New England. Yeah, can't stop the run. You would think that they should run the football this week. With all the problems they've had throwing it, with the injuries at receiver now. Like I said, nobody's stretching the field for this Patriots team. I can't believe the lack of speed. There's nobody that can break away from a cornerback down the field. It's like they're stuck to them. One-on-one coverage is airtight because there's no speed demon on this New England receiving core. That's an issue. So, and you're right, Bills have struggled against the run. You would think this is a game that should feature the Patriots' ground attack quite a bit. We should see a lot of James White, Rex Burkhead. That's who essentially you're down to, because Sony Michel is on the COVID reserve list. Damian Harris is questionable. You might be down to James White and Rex Burkhead. Even if you're down to those two guys, you would think Bill Belichick and the Patriots might try to run it a lot here against the Bills. But after what I saw from New England last week, it's a tough team for me personally to bet on. But you're talking about laying 3.5, 4 with a Bills team that's not exactly in their best current form right now either. But it's a really, really fascinating game to watch. It's not one I plan on betting on, but it should be interesting to see how it goes. Tennessee, Cincinnati. Tennessee, 5.5-point favorites, 53.5 the total. There's rumblings out of Cincinnati of player dissension, players sort of, bickering and problems behind the scenes. The defense just continues to be awful week in and week out, giving up, big plays through the air, can't stop the run. They trade away and now Carlos Dunlap, of course, yesterday to the other day to the Seattle Seahawks. Yet the Cincinnati Bengals just continue to be a point spread covering machine. I mean, they have been found ways to cover numbers this year, and it's all because of Joe Burrow, backdoor Burrow, as I like to call him. He has been keeping this Bengals team pretty much afloat because their defense hasn't stopped anybody, but he's been chucking the football down the field, finding Tyler Boyd, finding his receivers, T. Higgins. He's developed great chemistry with him. Look, they're 5-1-1 against the spread this year, Cincinnati. So, in this price range, Tennessee's better than Cincinnati. You've got Tennessee off the tough loss against Pittsburgh last week, first loss of the season. They got dominated in the first half. They did make a good, valiant effort to come back in the second half, but fell short after Steven Gostkowski missed what would have been a game-tying field goal for the Titans last week against the Steelers. So Tennessee's probably going to be chomping at the bit to bounce back, but one of the things I rarely do in the NFL is when I'm talking about laying more than a field goal with teams that can't consistently get stops on the defensive side of the football, I'm not interested. Tennessee's that team right now. And I think this defense is going to be what keeps Tennessee out of true Super Bowl contender talk this year. They're not very good on that side of the football. Can anyone explain to me where Jadeveon Clowney has been this season for the Titans? I can't find that guy with a telescope on the football field. Where's the impact plays from him? He was supposed to bolster this pass rush for the Tennessee Titans, and I don't see him really making that kind of impact for Tennessee on the defensive side. They've struggled on that side of the ball. Pittsburgh did whatever they wanted. Houston Texans lit them up a couple of weeks ago. They only beat Houston because they outscored them, and Houston's defense was even worse than Tennessee's was that day. I don't like laying these kind of points, especially on the road with a defense that I don't trust. And right now, the Titans have a defense that I don't trust. They're not getting stops. And in this price range where Tennessee could be up by 10 or up by 7 or 10, they could be up by 10 late in the game. And, Cincinnati gets the ball back, 2 minutes to go. Joe Burrow is fully capable of getting that sucker in the end zone for your backdoor touchdown against a defense that's struggling like this. So, I lean Cincinnati here, but I don't like hearing these rumblings of what's going on behind the scenes. It looks like there's some players that are cantankerous, that are sort of revolting a little bit, and their defense against Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, and for all the concerns I have of Tennessee's defense, they've got one hell of an offense this season. Ryan Tannehill is playing like a top 5 quarterback in this league. I think it's fair to say. I don't think it's crazy to say that. He's played that well for the Titans. A.J. Brown being back from injury has made a massive difference in terms of this team's ability to stretch the field down, in the passing game as well. This is a well-oiled offense. They can run it. They can throw it. Corey Davis, Adam Humphries as well. Jonnu Smith at tight end. This is a Tennessee offense that is balanced, is explosive, and they're loaded with weapons. Receiver, tight end, one of the best running backs in the NFL, and Derrick Henry. There's nothing not to like about Tennessee's offense. More than anything, I think this game goes over the total. It's a high number. I'm trying to scale back on overs because we're starting to see these NFL totals consistently more and more in the high 40s and the 50s with a lot of these games. And again, last couple weeks, the unders have started to balance out in comparison to overs. First 4 or 5 weeks of the season, it was an over-palooza in the National Football League. The last couple of weeks, we've started to see more unders come in. It's been more and more even in terms of overs versus unders on a weekly basis in the NFL. So I'm trying to scale back now and just not firing away like crazy on every single over. But this is an over that I will be betting, no question. And especially now that it's dropped a little bit down to 53.5. That brings 31-24, 31-27, 28-27, 31-28. It brings those 35-28. It brings those common scores into play. All of those scores I just mentioned will cash an over ticket in this game. I think that's very doable with these two teams. Cincinnati can flat out move at the ball on offense, and they can do it against a defense that I don't even consider Tennessee right now an average defense. Like, they're not playing well on that side of the football, the Titans. So Cincinnati's going to put up their points, I think, with Burrow and Boyd and Higgins and that receiving core. But on the flip side, I don't see where the stops are going to come from Cincinnati against the Titans offense either here. So this game over the total just sticks out like a sore thumb at me here for the Sunday card. So I like over 53.5 here between Tennessee and Cincinnati. I think we got another shootout involving the Bengals, just like last week. We saw the Bengals and the Browns, and I had the over there in that game as well. I think we get another shootout here, Titans, Bengals on Sunday. Las Vegas and Cleveland. Cleveland 2.5-point favorites here. 51 the total. This total's come down from 55.5 to 51. I'm kind of interested in bucking this move as well, down to 51 and looking over the total in this game. Las Vegas's defense is not very good. I mean, this is another team. Where's the pass rush? Tom Brady, who is not very fleet of foot. He had all day to throw the football last week against the Raiders defense. That's a problem. But the Raiders can move the ball on offense. I like what I'm seeing from Derek Carr. I mean, last week, the second half was kind of rough for him. But you look at what they're doing offensively. They're averaging 4 yards per carry, 113 yards per game on the ground, 7.9 yards per play through the air, 277 per game. They should be able to do damage. This Cleveland secondary, and I said this on Twitter last week as I was watching the Cincinnati game, they're very thankful that Baker Mayfield played well last week against the Cleveland Browns. Of course, Odell Beckham Jr. out for the season, torn ACL in that game. They'll miss him, but I think they've still got receivers that can step up. Rashard Higgins has played well. Donovan Peoples-Jones with the terrific touchdown catch to win that game for the Browns last week. Jarvis Landry. There's still enough wide receiving options for Baker Mayfield here to throw the football. They'll miss Austin Hooper at tight end. He's doubtful, but Harrison Bryant, the guy they drafted, and David Njoku are still very capable options at the tight end spot. So they've got options there at tight end, even without Austin Hooper for this game, the Browns. But I said this on Twitter last week, getting back to Cleveland's defense, outside of Denzel Ward, who is a really good cornerback, he is, and he deserves to be credited as such. Outside of him and outside of Myles Garrett, where are the consistent game breaker impact players on the defensive side of the football for Cleveland this season? Because to me, there's only two guys I see consistently making plays on this defense, especially against good offenses. That's Denzel Ward and that's Myles Garrett. That's it. They're not getting much from anybody else. And the Cleveland defense, the more I see them, the more I'm worried. They've had secondary issues injury-wise all season long. And Greedy Williams hasn't played much at all this year, for instance. They don't have a lot outside of Denzel Ward in that secondary, especially because of those secondary injuries. Outside of Myles Garrett, there's no one really consistently thwarting the line of scrimmage for the Cleveland Browns on the defensive side. And the more I see this Cleveland defense, the more I say they don't really impress me. You look at their last several games, they gave up 34 to Cincy, 38 to Pittsburgh, 23 to Indy, 38 to Dallas. This has not been a good Browns defense now for about 4 weeks in a row, 4 games in a row. And that worries me here against the Raiders, whose strength is their offense. Derek Carr, I think, has had a pretty good season overall. And he's got Josh Jacobs. He's got a receiving core that's been bolstered thanks to the draft and free agency. And Hunter Renfro's been good. Nelson Aguilar had a really good game last week. And, of course, Henry Ruggs, we're barely scratching the surface with how good a receiver he can be in this league. Darren Waller, the tight end's been excellent. This is a good offense here. And any kind of good offense has moved the ball and had success against Cleveland. So I don't love a side here in this game. Cleveland minus 2.5. I'm not in a rush to bet against Vegas off a loss. I remember the last time they lost a game, it was against Buffalo. And then they bounced back, of course, and they beat Kansas City and handed the Chiefs their only their first loss of the season. They had a bad game that got away from them last week against Tampa Bay in the second half. And Derek Carr said a lot of the same things after last week's loss to Tampa that he said after Buffalo. It's losing sucks. We win one, we lose one too much. And they came back the next week and they played one of their best games. It was their best game of the season, beating Kansas City. So I think Las Vegas to me would be a lean here. I'd probably want to get +3 or something even better, but at least +3 if I were to bet Vegas. But I will be getting involved in this total. I'm going to wait to see if it drops a little bit more. It's already gone down to 51. And I think a lot of people were reacting early in the week with this, betting this under because of the Odell Beckham news. And I understand it's a big loss for Cleveland, no question. And just because now a lot of defensive attention has to go to him, and now you can focus it elsewhere. But, Las Vegas to me, just spotty on defense is an understatement when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders. They just haven't been consistently good on that side of the ball. We've seen them give up, 45 to Tampa, 32 to Kansas City, 30 to Buffalo, 36 to New England, 30 in the opener against Carolina, which was putting in a brand new offensive system and new quarterback and new coaching staff. And Carolina in that first game put 30 on this Las Vegas Raiders defense. So 51, I'm interested over the total now here in this game. Again, I'm patient now. I didn't bet it early in the week, 55.5. I said probably not going to touch the total, but now it's 51. I'm definitely interested now. I think it's gone down a bit too much. And I think, again, a lot of the reaction and a lot of the impetus to bet that under was the Odell Beckham injury. And I don't think Cleveland's offense is completely going to go in the trash now without Odell. Yeah, they'll miss him, but there's other options in areas that Baker Mayfield can go to in terms of being able to throw the football and have success. All right, we'll move on down the card here as we're going at a pretty decent clip. We'll pick up the pace a little bit. Jets, Kansas City. I'm going to keep this one brief because this is an impossible game for me personally to bet. If anyone in the chat has a stronger opinion, I salute you because I sure don't. Kansas City, 19.5 point favorites, 49 the total. I can't bet a Jets game over. This game might actually stay under. Kansas City could put up 30, 35. I think it's pretty safe they will against this Jets team. But Kansas City's defense continues to be, I think, better than people think. I think it's a solid. They didn't have a good game against Las Vegas for some reason. They had a tough day. But outside of that, we've seen, Kansas City's defense played better. They shut down and frustrated Drew Lock yesterday. Stopped the run, forced Drew Lock into mistakes. Pick 6, of course, as well from Drew Lock in that game. It was an ugly day for him against this Kansas City defense. They neutralized Josh Allen and a pretty good Buffalo offense the week before. So after that really shoddy defensive game, which looks more and more like an anomaly for Kansas City when they gave up 40 to Las Vegas in their one and only loss. Other than that, 20 points allowed to the Chargers, 20 points allowed to Baltimore and Lamar Jackson, which is, I consider that a pretty good performance. 10 points allowed to New England, 17 to Buffalo, 16 to Denver. That looks more and more like an anomaly that they gave up 40 to the Raiders. Other than that, I've liked what I've seen from this Kansas City defense. They've been improved. They're getting more of a pass rush. The Kansas City Chiefs defense this year. Chris Jones has been the big reason for that. He's been absolutely outstanding in terms of getting a pass rush. I think they've been better against the run as well. So I don't know where the points are going to come from for Sam Darnold and the Jets offense. I know they got him back, and they showed little flashes of getting things going early in the game against Buffalo last week, but It was another case where Sean McDermott made his halftime adjustments and Adam Gase did nothing. He basically playing tiddlywinks at halftime. I don't know what he was doing, but basically Buffalo makes their adjustments at halftime. The Jets don't on offense, and the Bills just devour the Jets defense or Jets offense in the second half. Like I said earlier, Jets had 4 yards of offense in the second half against the Bills last week. That's not very good. The problem for backing the Chiefs here in this game is it's an obvious flat spot for Kansas City, and you always worry about focus in these kind of situations where you're playing a bottom feeder, you're playing the worst team in the National Football League. Is there really an urgency to go out there and just crush this team and win by 3 touchdowns? I'll be honest, even with the Jets finally covering a point spread last week for the first time this season, you look at their other losses, 24-point loss to Miami, 20-point loss to Arizona, 9-point loss to Denver. But against the really good teams, they lost by 18 to San Fran. They lost by 29 against Indianapolis. They could lose by 3 touchdowns here. But again, not spot-wise, it's not a spot I'm looking to lay 19 with Kansas City. I would take the Chiefs before I even consider the Jets, but I'm passing on this game with a slight lean to the under, just because I think if the Chiefs are up by a huge margin, they'll just grind clock. And like I say, the Jets, 49 is a high total for the Jets. For a team you're concerned can even crack double digits, in terms of points going into a game like this. So it's a slight lean to the under, but nothing more than that. And I'm not going to get involved from a side perspective here. Rams and Dolphins. We've got the LA Rams, 3.5-point road favorites, 46 the total in this game. This is a really interesting game because you got the Rams that bounced back strong and dominated the Chicago Bears on Monday Night Football last week. It was a really good performance, no doubt about it, from the LA Rams. Bounce back game. Their defense got after Nick Foles and the Bears offense very impressively. Multiple pressures, stopped the run. David Montgomery basically didn't do anything. And as soon as you can prevent Chicago from running the football and putting the game in Nick Foles' hands or the hands of any of their quarterbacks, to be honest with you, you can probably say the same thing about Mitch Trubisky as well. You're going to have a good chance to beat the Chicago Bears, and that's exactly what we saw in that game on Monday night. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see how Tua Tagovailoa looks here. It's going to be his NFL debut as a starting quarterback, his first NFL start. At least Brian Flores picked the right time to go with Tua. Bye week, lots of time to practice, lots of time to get ready here for his first NFL start. Yes, Ryan Fitzpatrick benched, and he was very upset about that. Look, and he's talking about how he thought this was his team, and I ranted about that before. You've been a journeyman backup. Settle down with this as your team. I mean, has any team been your team in your 10-plus years in the NFL? You've been bounced around from team to team, but nevertheless, we'll have to wait and see how Tua goes. Tua plays here. This is not an easy test for him. It's a very good Rams defense. It's a defensive line that's very, very good. They didn't have a good game against San Francisco, but they bounced back strong against Chicago last week. And you're getting Tua off a big, serious injury, make his debut now against Aaron Donald and a fierce pass rush. And when he's coming off this just really, really significant injury, how's his mobility going to be here against the Rams? I think at some point it's going to get 100% mobility back, but is he 100% got it right now? For a pass rush with Aaron Donald, that if you're not fully able to move around in the pocket as well as you'd like, that's definitely a matchup concern going into this game. So it'll be interesting to see, what kind of pressure they get on Tua Tagovailoa here in this game. The Rams, though, are vulnerable to being beat over the middle of the field. I think the Miami Dolphins might be able to have some success there. I think of guys like the tight end, Mike Gesicki. I think of the running back, Myles Gaskin, in terms of catching out of the backfield. I think those are good player props from a Miami perspective. You've got a good pass rush. You're not necessarily going to have time to fire downfield to Devontae Parker and the top receivers for this Dolphins team. So you're going to need a run game. You're going to need Gaskin involved. You're going to need a quick over-the-middle passing game. That's where Mike Gesicki, the tight end, gets involved. So those are the two guys I think could have a good prop day of it for the Miami Dolphins in this game. Looking at Gesicki and potentially Myles Gaskin as well. So it's really interesting here, this game. I'm personally when you've got not a clear vision or clear thought process as in terms of how a quarterback is going to play in his first start. Like if Tua's out there against Cleveland's defense or Tennessee's defense, or I'm trying to think Atlanta's defense, Detroit's defense, Minnesota's defense, Dallas's defense. I think if he's up against any of those type of weaker defenses, he may be able to go out there with the extra prep time and the bye week and play well. But this is not the easiest matchup here. First game against the LA Rams. On the other side of the equation, we know Jared Goff offensively, when he's pressured, he can become a mistake waiting to happen. I was a little bit surprised that, he played as well as he did against Chicago, although he still made almost a couple of mistakes in that game that Chicago didn't make him pay for. We'll have to wait and see here if the Miami Dolphins can get pressure. They should be able to run the football as well here with Darrell Henderson. Miami's run defense has been pretty weak this season. So, for me, I don't trust Miami here just yet. I want to see what Tua does in his first game. It's not a great spot for the Rams, though. The Rams have historically been very good in these East time zone games on the road. They've actually been quite good in these spots. And just look at this year. They went to Philadelphia, won. They went to Washington and won. They went to Buffalo. They should have won, and they came back, but Buffalo got them late. But they've played well away from home on the East Coast. It's been a good role for them, but it's a short week. It's West Coast to East Coast off Monday Night Football. So it's not a great Rams spot, not by any stretch of the imagination, whereas you got Miami fresh, rested, ready off a bye week, a chance to integrate Tua Tagovailoa into the offense. So that's what's keeping me off the Rams here. And for Miami, I would rather just sit back, wait, watch to see how he plays here against this Rams team. So for me, and Miami, to be honest with you, from a point spread perspective, they've found ways to cut. They're 4-1 ATS their last 5 games, albeit all of them with Fitzpatrick. But this has been an undervalued team. They lose by 3 to Buffalo. They lose by 10 to New England. They lose by 8 to Seattle at home, and they had a chance to tie the game late as well. So this has been a team that has been no pushover. They've been much better than I expected them to be. 3-3 straight up, 4-2 ATS for the season. But we'll see how Tua does. I don't have a strong grip or strong grasp on how he is going to play here, especially against a team that is very capable of getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And that's my worry here with Tua in this matchup, his first ever start. So it's a pass for me. It's just going to be a sit and watch game. Maybe I bet it live. We'll see how it goes. If Tua looks good early, then maybe I get in on Miami. If he's struggling early, maybe I get in with a live bet on the Rams. That's probably the way I'm going to approach this game when it's all said and done. All right, moving on down the card, we've got New Orleans, Chicago. We're down to the 4 o'clock games. Actually, we've got 2 right. We'll do the Pittsburgh, Baltimore, because that's a 1 o'clock game. Baltimore, 3.5, 4-point favorites, 46 the total. I thought the opening line in this game was nuts, that Baltimore was a full 6-point favorite in this game. You talk about no respect to Pittsburgh and what they've done. I was stunned by that. And here's the biggest thing that I think people were overlooking. And I think there's a reason why Pittsburgh, I think, has gone from +6 all the way down to +4, +3.5. Pittsburgh's run defense has been elite. There's not a lot of teams anymore that you can say can stop the run consistently. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been that team this year. They have been able to consistently stop the run. They bottled up Derrick Henry for the most part last week, a guy that's been absolutely running amok on opposing defenses. That's a good sign for Pittsburgh here, because I still think the passing game with Lamar Jackson is spotty. It's not where it needs to be right now. He's still working on it. There's still the doors open for Lamar to become a better pocket passer, but he's still not there yet. And if Pittsburgh's going to take away the ground game and, neutralize Lamar Jackson's scrambling ability, which they've shown the propensity to be able to do, can he beat the Pittsburgh Steelers defense with his arm? I'm not totally convinced of that here in this game. The one worry for me about liking Pittsburgh here, because I bet him when it was 4.5, it's 3.5 now in most spots, 3.5, 4. Baltimore is off a bye. John Harbaugh's been very good off a bye week in his career, straight up and ATS. But I thought the opening line here, putting Baltimore out a full 6-point favorite, was a little bit disrespectful, a little bit of a slap in the face in my mind to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You look at this Pittsburgh team, or you look at Baltimore rather, their schedule so far, barely beat Philadelphia, hung on in that game to beat the Eagles 30-28. Cincinnati was brutal in the 27-3 win for Baltimore against them. They turned the ball over a ton, and Baltimore really didn't do much offensively. A couple of those touchdowns were set up by the defense in that game. Washington, 31-17. They lost, of course, to Kansas City. They did play, I think their best game of the year was probably the first two games, Cleveland and Houston. They played well, blowing out the Browns and the Texans. But since then, they had the bad game against Kansas City. Washington, they didn't look great. Cincinnati, the misleading final score. I don't think they dominated to the level of the 27-3 final score would indicate. And then the Philadelphia game, they hung on, at the end, survived and win 30-28. So this is going to be a challenge here for Baltimore. And when it comes to Steelers versus Ravens, one of the best rivalries in the NFL, so many times we've seen these games come down to a field goal and a 3-point game either way. So the fact I can get more than 3 with either of these teams, regardless of whether it's Pittsburgh like they are here getting 3.5, 4, or if it was Baltimore. Let's say they played in Pittsburgh and Baltimore was getting 3.5 or 4. I would probably just take the dog. They play close games. They play tight games. This should be another one. And to me, Pittsburgh, the eye test tells me they're in this AFC contender conversation because they're one of the few teams in the NFL that on defense, they've been able to get it done. There's not a whole lot of great elite defenses in the NFL this season. There isn't. Pittsburgh has shown the ability to be one of those teams. And because they are outstanding against the run, which is the strength of the Ravens, I think they match up pretty decently here. I'm not saying they win outright because you could say 3-point game either way, but you're going to give me more than a field goal with the undefeated Steelers, with their defense's ability to stop the run, which is the Ravens' strength. I'm interested. I like Pittsburgh here, plus the points in this big AFC North showdown here Sunday afternoon in Baltimore. LA Chargers, Denver. Chargers opened a 1-point road favorite up to 3 with juice, 44.5 the total in this game. I bet it immediately, LA Chargers, and I still like them at -3. They don't do a lot of things easily, and we're finding that out, the Chargers, the last couple of weeks. It's not been pretty for the LA Chargers. Their defense really hasn't been the same this year. I know they've had some injuries on that side of the football, but I got to say their defense has been disappointing. The last 3 weeks, 38 allowed to Tampa, 30 allowed to New Orleans, 29 allowed to Jacksonville last week, although one of those touchdowns for Jacksonville was a block punt return for a touchdown. So really they only got 22 offensive points, but Gardner Minshew and the offense moved the ball at times against the Chargers defense. But there's a lot to like about the Chargers offense. And now that's 3 straight overs, by the way, for the LA Chargers. 69, 57, and 68 points in their last 3 games. They've suddenly become an over team because their defense hasn't been as good. But Justin Herbert, man, he's looking extremely impressive in his rookie season at quarterback. Anthony Lynn probably making the right decision here in terms of going with him instead of Tyrod Taylor. He's played well at the quarterback spot, no question, for this LA Chargers team. He's been able to find good chemistry with his receivers, even with, Keenan Allen is obviously the be-all, end-all at receiver for the Chargers, but Mike Williams has stepped up. Jalen Guyton has really been good the last couple weeks, making plays. Hunter Henry, the tight end, has stayed healthy and been good at the tight end spot. We know he's a good tight end, but staying away from injuries has been his problem. This is a good offense right now. They're playing well. They should be able to have success here against Denver. To me, they're just better than Denver right now. I know it's Denver off the bad game. I know it's against Kansas City last week, but not a good game for Drew Lock. He seems to be regressing a little bit the last couple of weeks. There's some injuries at tight end for this team, some injuries at wide receiver for this team. The offensive line was completely blown off the line of scrimmage repeatedly by the Chiefs last week. And the LA Chargers' strength defensively is still that front with Joey Bosa and with Melvin Ingram. And if Kansas City is just wreaking havoc on that Denver offensive line last week, the strength of that Chargers defense should be able to have some similar success here in this game. I would lean to the over as well because of the fact the Chargers have gone over the total in 3 straight games. They have not even been close to the total. They've soared over the total with room to spare. And we're only talking 44.5 here with this total. I just wish I had more faith in Denver's offense because that offense hasn't been going for them the last few weeks. New England shut them down. They didn't really get much. They won that game, but it wasn't because of their offense. They got pretty much shut down for the most part in that game against the Patriots. They got bottled up by Kansas City last week. It's not been a great run of it for this Denver Broncos offense, and that's a concern that I have for them going into this game here against the LA Chargers. Nevertheless, I still think the overs might be worth a small little play, but I like the side a little bit stronger. The LA Chargers laying 3 here. And I like that the fact that, they were struggling to win games. They finally got a win, albeit Jacksonville, but they're 2-4. You look at this team, they're one of the best 2-4 teams in the NFL. They have to be. They lost by 3 to New Orleans. They could have won that game. They lost by 7 to Tampa Bay, and they had a big lead in the first half, and the game got away from them. They lost by 5 against Carolina, another winnable game. They lost by 3 against Kansas City in week 2. They've had so many opportunities to win these close games. They're better, I think, talent-wise than their 2-4 record would indicate. So I think they take care of business here. They beat this Denver team. I don't mind laying the 3 on the road with the LA Chargers here in this game. All right, moving on now to the 4 p.m. games, New Orleans, Chicago. New Orleans, 4.5-point road favorites. The total 43.5 in this game. Lots of money toward New Orleans, and you can understand why. Chicago didn't look good last week on Monday Night Football against the Rams. More offensive issues. Can't run the football. Nick Foles not being able to get much going in terms of the passing game either for the Chicago Bears. Not very good in terms of play calling either from Matt Nagy. I've been kind of disappointed. Like, you've got to try to get creative. Throw some different formations, at the opposing defense. I don't think we're seeing enough of creativity from him right now in terms of offensive play calling. That kind of bothers me as well about this Chicago offense right now. He missed a ton of open receivers, Nick Foles, in that game. The offensive line just was mauled by Aaron Donald, and the former Bear, Leonard Floyd, had a huge game as well defensively against that Bears offense last week. The offensive line, which was already not great to begin with, hasn't been great all season. James Daniels gets an injury in that game. They can't afford injuries on the offensive line, period, Chicago. And now they lose James Daniels, who's one of their more reliable O-linemen. That's a concern, in my opinion. I just don't know how the Chicago Bears, are going to keep Nick Foles upright here in this game against the Saints. The Saints do have a solid pass rush. Let's not forget, it was that Saints pass rush that finally, even though they struggled last week against Carolina, when the game was on the line, they finally got that stop to force Carolina basically out of field goal range. They still tried it. It was like a 60-yarder. He missed it. They can get pressure, and they've got a besieged offensive line that they're up against here that's now not only playing poorly this season, but now is dealing with a couple key injuries. So I don't know if I trust Chicago's offense to move the ball. New Orleans' defense has been shoddy for the better part of the last few weeks. There's no question. This is not a Saints defense that's been as good as I thought, as good as a lot of people thought they would be this season. I mean, you look at these New Orleans defensive numbers, they've not been great at all for the Saints this season at times, especially the last few games. That bothers me a little bit going into this game. They're giving up, 4.3 yards per carry. Actually, against the run, they've been good. It's against the pass they've struggled. But can Nick Foles and this Bears offense, to be able to throw the football, you've got to be able to pass protect. And I don't know if the Bears can consistently do that right now. Most of the yards that the Saints have given up on defense have been through the air. They actually are stopping the run pretty well. 90 rushing yards allowed per game, 3.5 yards per carry. Those are pretty solid numbers for New Orleans against the run. So to me, matchup-wise, it should work for New Orleans offense against Chicago's defense. The New Orleans defense against Chicago's offense. The question becomes, look, Chicago's defense, especially here, outdoors, colder weather, Soldier Field, they did as good a job against Tom Brady and the Bucs as any team that's faced Tampa Bay this season a few weeks ago. That's what concerns me here. And we know Drew Brees and the Saints, sometimes on the road, outside of the dome, they're not quite the same offense. They're still without Sanders. They're still without Thomas. That's a concern. Drew Brees, of course, not a mobile quarterback. How are you going to deal with Akeem Hicks? How are you going to deal with Khalil Mack on that defensive line? That's the problem to me with laying the 4.5 here with New Orleans. I'm not doing it. I think if you got 2.5 on New Orleans at the opener, got them less than a field goal, great number. Probably a play for me at that number with New Orleans here. But now at 4.5, I'm going to stay away because Chicago's defense, one of their best games was on this field against Tampa Bay and Tom Brady. And they've got the capability on that side of the football to be as disruptive against New Orleans as they were on that Thursday night game earlier this season against Tampa Bay. The total in this game is the thing that probably is the thing that would interest me most. It's already been bet down. I agree. 46 down to 43.5. You tell me if you're comfortable betting a Chicago game over the total right now. 4 straight unders for the Chicago Bears, 19-11, 20-19, 23-16, 24-10. This is like 1980s NFL football with the Chicago Bears every game right now. Their games aren't even getting out of the 30s in terms of total points. It's like we're back in 1980, not 2020. 30 points, 39 points, 39 points, and then 34 points on Monday Night Football against the Rams. So there's a reason why this total has been bet down. I agree with it. I'm not a huge under guy, but the under makes perfect sense to me in this Saints-Bears game. I understand why it's gone down from 46 to 43.5. San Francisco, Seattle. What a game this should be. Seattle 3-point favorites at home, 54 the total. Seattle losing their first game of the season in that incredible overtime thriller last week against the Arizona Cardinals. It was a fantastic football game, back and forth, edge of your seat drama. Arizona, give them credit. They were trailing most of that game. Their defense had trouble against Russell Wilson, but a lot of teams do. But Kyler Murray and that Arizona offense, they stayed resilient. They stayed with it, and they ended up coming back to win that game against the Seattle Seahawks, an overtime thriller. Seattle's offense, boy, Russell Wilson is just amazing again. His ability to avoid the pass rush, make plays on the run, find Tyler Lockett, find DK Metcalf, find his receivers down the field. It's been a thing to behold. The offensive line has been better as well for Seattle, and they're in bounce back mode off the loss. I kind of lean a little bit here toward the Seattle Seahawks side now that it's down to 3. It's a good bounce back spot for them. Look, San Francisco, is getting healthier. We know this team has been just deluged by injuries this season, but back-to-back very impressive wins against the Rams and the Patriots after those shocking losses to the Eagles and the Dolphins, where they were laying more than a touchdown at home, and they lost both of those games in straight-up fashion. So it's been a good bounce back for the 49ers. Jimmy Garoppolo, could you tell he was excited to stick it to Bill Belichick and the Patriots last week? That's as good a game as I've seen him play in a little bit for the 49ers at quarterback. He was really good last week. I think it's a really good spot for Seattle. They're at home, first loss of the season, but I'm still leery about laying points with a defense that can't stop anybody, and that's Seattle. They have got a terrible defense, especially with Jamal Adams still out in the secondary. They've got no cornerback play that I trust to shut down opposing receivers, and Kyle Shanahan is as good at scheming and game planning and offense as it gets, and now he gets to scheme and game plan against one of the weakest defenses he's coached against this season. That worries me a little bit. Seattle has no pass rush, none, 0. In fact, I think in terms of quarterback pressures and sacks, Seattle is one of the worst teams, if not the worst team, in terms of lack of a pass rush this season. Like Kyler Murray had all day throughout that game to get the ball down the field last week in that Sunday night game. And, if you give Jimmy Garoppolo that kind of time, he's going to make you pay for it. I might have a small play on Seattle, and certainly I wouldn't want it at higher than 3 because, again, it falls into my criteria where if it's a leaky defense, I don't want to lay more than 3 points with them. Seattle's definitely in that conversation right now. Plus, another thing to keep in mind, Seattle on defense, that defense was on the field a ton in the desert last week in Arizona, an overtime game, Sunday night. Recovery time is limited compared to what it usually is. That could be a winded, tired defense for a defense that's already struggling and not all that good to begin with. They're struggling against the pass. There's no pass rush at all for this Seahawks team. That could come into play here. 54, the total. I cashed a ticket with Seattle, Arizona over the total last Sunday night. I lean to the over here. It's high. San Francisco runs the ball a lot. They're not a fast-paced offense. That's the one issue I've got. It's a high total considering San Francisco's not going to rush to the line of scrimmage to snap the football. But you're not going to catch me betting Seattle under right now. No way. Not with this defense and not with Russell Wilson, obviously, on the other side of the ball playing as well as he has. And Seattle's 4-2 to the over this season as well. So I lean over the total and I lean to Seattle. Haven't bet those yet, but those are the ways I'm looking here in this game. Seahawks -3 over 54. Sunday Night Football. I'm sure they wish they could flex out of this game, NBC, but here it is. Someone's got to win this crap-ass division, and it could be one of these two teams, believe it or not. Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia 9-point favorites, 43 the total. Keep your eye, obviously, on Andy Dalton's status. That is significant. He's questionable right now. We know just an embarrassing game for Dallas last week. It was everything. Their offensive line is just a shit show. It is a mangled mash unit with La'el Collins out, Tyron Smith out, Zach Martin. I mean, this is a gutted offensive line, and they were just overwhelmed by Washington and that defensive front of the Washington football team last week. It looks like McCarthy is saying that Dalton's not going to participate in practice today. The fact that he didn't participate in practice yesterday or today, I think it makes some. It sure looks like we might be looking at Ben DiNucci, former Pitt Panther quarterback, not very good. Think about Ben DiNucci. He's a backup to freaking Nate Peterman years ago at Pitt. That's when you're a backup, you can't even beat out Nathan Peterman to be a starting quarterback in a college football team. I don't know what that says about you. I honestly don't. So that's what we're looking at here with Ben DiNucci, potentially the starting quarterback for Dallas. I think as long as this number stays below double digits, I think you can go ahead and lay it with Philly. I'm going to end up doing. Dallas looks like they're just tapping out. I mean, it's every phase. It's the offense is a mess. Zeke Elliott can't hang on to the football. The offensive line is an injury-riddled disaster. They have no quarterback now. They might be down to a third stringer in Ben DiNucci, who was not great in college and now is going to be thrust into action here in his first ever NFL start on the road. The defense just can't get a stop. They don't get a pass rush. They can't stop the run. Everything is wrong and broken with this Dallas Cowboys team right now. They're bickering at the coach. They're already throwing Mike McCarthy under the bus, saying he doesn't make good adjustments, and they're already making public comments about the coaching staff not being what they want it to be. What's to like about Dallas here? And you look at their recent results here, it's a steep number, but it's warranted in my mind. And you look at Dallas, they lose by 11 to Cleveland. They beat the Giants. They get destroyed by Arizona. It's the last two games that stand out to me after Dak Prescott got injured in the Giants game. 38-10 to Arizona, 25-3 to Washington. They lose those games by 22 points or more. I think Philly can get to a 10-point or more win. And I like the momentum Philadelphia's built. Ugly win against the Giants, but they won 22-21. They battled back from a big deficit against Baltimore to almost steal that game the week before. They were competitive against Pittsburgh. They beat San Francisco. There's signs of life for Doug Peterson's team here for the Eagles. And if they show any sign of life here, it may be good enough just right then and there, all by itself, to just, bury this Dallas team and win by double digits. So I haven't pulled the trigger yet. I'm going to wait to see what Dalton's status is, but see where this number goes. But I'll tell you right now, if you can get below 10, I'm very much interested in laying the points with Philadelphia. I never thought I'd say that, but that was a quit. That was quit in the Dallas Cowboys last week. That was quit in the Dallas Cowboys 2 weeks ago against Arizona, and again last week against Washington. That's not just we suck on both sides of the football. There was some we don't give a shit. There was some we don't give a damn in the Dallas Cowboys performance the last couple weeks. I can't bet on a team like that. That's not only just absolutely failing in all phases of the game right now, but quitting and just giving up in the middle of the game like that and not backing up their quarterback when he gets hit like he did in that game against the Washington football team. No, Philadelphia or pass for me. I want no part of the Dallas Cowboys. All right, let's wrap it up. Final game, Monday Night Football. Giants, Buccaneers to wrap up week 8. We've got the Tampa Bay Bucks, 12-point road favorites, 45 the total. Look, the numbers gotten carried away on Tampa Bay. I took Tampa against Green Bay because it was a good spot. Green Bay off the bye, but everybody's singing their praises when they were undefeated going into the bye. I figured this is that classic NFL situational spot where the team coming out of the bye week that's undefeated lays an egg and has a clunker. And Green Bay had that against Tampa Bay. So I had Tampa Bay in that game. I took them again last week against Las Vegas, knowing the Raiders had Trent Brown out on the offensive line, the COVID-19 issues with the O-line, and Tampa Bay took advantage of that. Their defense swarmed Derek Carr because of those offensive line issues, whereas Tampa Bay's offense and Brady, one of Brady's best games in years against a suspect Raiders defense. That throw he made to Scotty Miller, that had to have been one of the better throws I've seen out of Tom Brady in a very long time. Deep ball, which he has not been able to do consistently for the last couple of years. Wonderful deep ball to Scotty Miller for that big touchdown. Very impressive performance from Brady. He should be able to do some damage here against the Giants defense here in this game, but it is a lot of points to lay here with the Tampa Bay Bucks. It's double digits on the road. It's a potential flat spot here after back-to-back wins against Green Bay and Las Vegas. Now you're going on the road facing the lowly Giants. And if you're Tampa Bay, you've got a huge game. Think about this. Think about this spot. You've got a huge game with the New Orleans Saints at home following this game, which is like on Sunday Night Football, which is likely going to be Antonio Brown's debut with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It doesn't smell like a spot that I've really rushing to bet Tampa Bay. I don't know if I can make a case here for the New York Giants, who, by the way, on their home field, the New York Giants, they're 0-7 ATS in their last 7 home games. So they have been brutal, in terms of being able to cover point spreads here at MetLife Stadium in New York. They've been absolutely atrocious, in terms of being a point spread team here on their home field. They've been a decent road point spread team at times. And again, they showed that last week, the road underdog role. That's the one role I kind of like the New York Giants in, and I'll consider backing them when they're a road dog. But when they're a favorite or if they're a home underdog, they have not been good in that role. And I don't know if I trust them enough because Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, when he's under pressure, he's spitting out pennies, not dimes. He's Danny Pennies. In fact, he may not even be worth pennies when he goes up against a team that can rush the quarterback. And Tampa Bay can do that. I'm more and more impressed with this Tampa Bay defensive front the more I see them. And they seem to be getting better each week. I think the strides they've made on defense. Remember when this defense couldn't get a stop for many seasons when Jameis Winston was the quarterback of this team? To see how far this Bucs defense has come this season, it's been impressive to see. So Tampa Bay, even if they're sort of looking ahead to New Orleans, they could probably still cover this number. I just don't know if I trust them to. They could be just perfectly content with just grinding out a 7-point or a 10-point win and then moving on. So it's a really tough game. Obviously, people always like betting what they last saw, and what they last saw are 2 impressive wins in a row for Tampa Bay. And they also saw the New York Giants coughing up that lead against Philadelphia last Thursday night. But it's the numbers just a little bit too rich for my blood right now. I don't want the Giants here, but I don't know if I'm going to lay 12 now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Probably a game I'm going to look at props when it comes to the Monday nighter between the Bucs and the Giants more than anything else. All right, that'll wrap it up. That's the show. Pub Sports Radio, Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Another show in the books for Thursday, October the 29th. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. It's been a great show. Everyone in the chat, thank you for tuning in. College football in terms of Thursday, Friday, I did say I would throw out a couple games. I kind of like Colorado State tonight against Fresno. Fresno's a bet against team for me until proven otherwise. New quarterback, new head coach, rebuilt defense, and it showed last week. 34-19 loss to Hawaii. They gave up 300 yards on the ground. That's not good. I think Colorado State, a little bit more talented team, better quarterback play. Patrick O'Brien and even Todd Centeio, the Temple transfer, has played a lot in his career. I think they can get it done. And I lean to Minnesota laying the big number against Maryland. Maryland looks like a bet. They look atrocious on both sides of the ball. I don't like the coach. Minnesota off the loss to Michigan. I think they answer back and respond and maybe completely blow out Maryland in that game tomorrow night. And Hawaii, Wyoming, I like Hawaii, but I don't love the spot for them. They did stay in Denver this week. They didn't go back to the island. They stayed in the mainland after playing in Fresno last week. So they're in Denver this week. They're getting used and acclimated to the colder air and the altitude. I think that's a stroke of genius for Hawaii to do that. It shouldn't be that culture shock playing on a Friday night in cold, blustery Laramie, Wyoming. That's a good football team. I know Wyoming's taking money, and I think it's because of the spot. They're worried about Hawaii, 2 straight road games. But if you do your digging and your research, they stayed in Denver, Colorado all week, in cold air, in the altitude. They're getting themselves ready for that environment they're going to be in against Wyoming. And I like Chevan Cordero, the quarterback, Chevan Cordero. They ran the football well last week. Wyoming's down to their second string quarterback because Sean Chambers got injured last week. And they rallied Wyoming against Nevada. And then Nevada pulled it out in overtime last week against them. I think Hawaii can win that game, but it's not a strong opinion for me because of the fact that, again, if they had gone back to Hawaii after playing Fresno and then come all the way back to travel to Wyoming, I think it would have been a worse spot for them. It's not as bad of a spot because they stayed in Denver this week in altitude. It gets them adjusted to what to expect. And that's why if this number pushes up to Wyoming -3, I mean, Hawaii was a favorite. Wyoming is now the favorite. But if this gets up to 3 on Wyoming, and there's a little bit of a hint in the betting markets that it could get to Wyoming -3, then I'll become more interested in backing Hawaii if I can get a full field goal with them here in this game. But those are just some thoughts for me on the Thursday, Friday college football slate. Reminder, I'm on the air Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time with Connor Mack with the College Football Closing Time Show, breaking down the Saturday college card. And the announcement before we wrap it up. Sunday, noon Eastern, right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. We've got a new NFL pregame show, kickoff show. We'll break down every NFL Week 8 game. It'll be me, it'll be Connor Mack, and it'll be Ski Profit, a good friend of ours as well, who is really doing a good job in NFL. Of course, he's great with NBA. He's great with WNBA, but he handicaps the NFL as well. And last I checked on his Twitter, he's doing pretty well in the NFL. So Ski Profit, Connor Mack, and myself, Sunday at noon Eastern, right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel with our NFL pre-kickoff show, breaking down every game from a betting perspective. So make sure you tune in for that. And that'll be a show that will air every Sunday moving forward here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. And with that, I bid you adieu. Gas Station Sushi, Jansen, Rick Ramone, William B., Boston, Nick. Good to see you there. Fat Fist. You got rid of that nickname. You're Boston Nick now. Deer Slayer Ski, Gerald Jones, Ryan C., Sage, everybody else, thank you for tuning in. Have a great NFL week. Good luck with your wagers here in Week 8. Thanks for watching Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, and I will be back with you next Thursday, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern, and we'll do it all over again with another edition of Pub Sports Radio, Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.